Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Wasteland Talks, my weekly talk show where honestly we'll talk about anything. Had a baseball episode recently. Other people have some ideas, but this week I have Robert here, one of the editors of SiftPop and a good friend of mine who's a frequent collaborator on my channel, here to talk a little bit about maybe one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Martin Scorsese, and we're going to talk about why. But Robert, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, like always, thanks for having me on. Always happy to join.
Absolutely. Would you like to shamelessly plug anything before we get started?
Yeah, I've been doing this lately. I'll just plug my Twitter, which is _Rob's Thoughts. If I ever do anything that I want people to see, it'll be tweeted out. So just follow
There you
me on
go.
Twitter.
Oh, because I don't go on other shows a whole lot at this point. And I was on Rowan's on Monday and he's like, you get to shamelessly plug, it's your turn. I'm like, but what do I say? And I did actually try to say everything. And I'm like, this is obscene.
And then 3 hours later, you started the podcast.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. So it's like a 4.5 hour podcast because how long it took me to talk about all the crap that I do. So there you go. But how our structure here is for our all-time great version of this show. If you haven't gotten a chance to check out those watching, check out my Alfred Hitchcock one that I did with Adam, who's also one of my frequent collaborators. But basically, we're each going to talk a little bit about some main reasons why we feel like Scorsese is one of the greatest directors of all time, and then share our favorite film of his. And it was interesting because my favorite was one of Adam's least favorite and most overrated. I'm like, well, this is going to get interesting when we were talking about Hitchcock. But so, Robert, why do you think Martin Scorsese is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time?
Well, I do want to start off just very quickly and say that I haven't seen Scorsese's documentaries. He's done a lot of music documentaries. I haven't seen any of those. And some of just the less prolific movies like Kundun or Boxcar Bertha, I haven't gotten around to see. But for the most part, I'm looking at my letterbox list now. I've seen 19 of his movies. So I think that's it's a pretty good representative list.
That is more movies than most directors have directed.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So my first thing my first reason, I guess, for why I think he's an all-time great is the themes that he likes to explore throughout his filmography, and that can be contributed to by a lot of different parts of filmmaking, and we can definitely get into those. But when I boil it down, I think what compels me most about Scorsese is the ideas that he has, the things that he wants to talk about. I wasn't raised in New York City, but I did grow up in New York in an Italian family that was heavily influenced by the Christian/Catholic religion. So his movies resonate with me in a very specific way. So obviously that's a big thing that's throughout a lot of his movies, as well as masculinity, just America, excess, family. There's a lot of different stuff that he likes to explore, and those are really the first things that come to mind whenever I think of Scorsese.
Yeah, and I grew up in a very ethnically Italian family from Philly. So same basic idea. And
very
what's
similar.
so interesting is having gone through about to go through my last one this weekend, rewatching The Irishman, but watching all of his films, I never realized how deeply resonant his films were to me personally. And realizing it's one of those kinds of times where you actually consciously think about how nice it is to actually have somebody who represents you.
Yeah.
And understand, I'm like, wow, I get this on a deeper level than I think most people might. And because I have this feeling, I understand this, and those themes, especially of religion, permeate his film so deeply. And a lot of the ones you might not expect, and it might not be the most overt. Obviously, some of them are very overt. And it was very interesting when I wrote articles for Last Temptation of Christ, and I just wrote one this week for Silence, because they are faith-based films. It's just they challenge you, and I think that makes them more interesting.
100%.
Because most of them are just like, hey, Christianity, whoosh, and just slap you in the face with it. And this, he actually because like he was going to be a priest at one point, and you could tell that means so much to him, his religion, and you know, that Catholic guilt. There's a lot of that in some of his early films. Like watching them for the first time, I'm like, oh, I get that. I get that a lot. But I do appreciate, like, especially the themes, especially because, like, and even when he does tackle those themes, he does them in such an interesting and compelling way, and deeper than a lot of filmmakers you might see. But what are some of your other points why you think Scorsese is one of the all-time greats?
I'll continue being fairly general with this and say his diversity in his filmmaking style slash like the types of stories that he tackles. I know it's a joke and all that on Twitter that all he ever does is make gangster movies, yada yada, all that kind of stuff. But that's not true at all, because like you were just talking about, there's Silence, there's Last Temptation of Christ, there's After Hours, King of Comedy, Shutter Island, you know, all this kind of stuff. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, you know.
Yeah.
Age of Innocence. If you look at like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and Goodfellas, you're not going to think, oh, these are the same director, just on a surface level. So that's what I really appreciate, because we were joking about how I've seen 19 of his movies, and that's more than many people have made. And it's not like he's just doing the same thing over and over. He's been so he's had such a career of longevity, and he's been so prolific because he's able to do different things with his movies. Like I mentioned, the Goodfellas or Wolf of Wall Street is all about excess and you know, this toxic masculinity and how doing the wrong thing is never the right thing, and all that kind of stuff. And then you have something that's so personal like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which is like the relationship between a mother and a son, and how difficult it is as a single parent, and all. It's just, oh man, that's really what I love about Scorsese, is that, like I said, the diversity and the types of stories he tells.
And you brought up a couple of interesting points specifically, and like to talk about because definitely the diversity of his filmography was definitely one of the things that stuck out to me, because it is the running joke. Scorsese just makes gangster movies, and even his gangster movies, like you watch Goodfellas and The Departed, are very different movies.
Oh yeah,
because like The Departed is equally as much about the cop side of things as it is about the gangster side of things. And it's a different cultural kind of thing too, because like Italian versus Irish mob, like you don't like those guys down from Providence. but you have something like Gangs in New York, which is a period one, which I want to love that movie to pieces, but there's so many messy things about it. But that's one of the films I think that I was able to talk about the most, honestly, because there's just so much to talk about. Like he made a Civil War movie and like commentary on racism and America. And you have something like New York, New York. He made a musical, and with Liza Minnelli in it. Did have Robert De Niro in it. So that made a lot of sense. But like, it's so weird because like, I know I'm trying to think of the films that I've watched that I think that really stood out to me more this time around. King of Comedy was definitely one of them. I absolutely love that film. And that's so different for Scorsese, and it was so different for De Niro. And I have a really soft spot for The Color of Money, which is a sports movie. And
that's one that I didn't get to see, and I'm so upset that I haven't seen it ahead of this conversation.
Yeah, well, and because the thing is, I have a deep love for The Hustler too, and it feels like it's such an interesting like late sequel that you don't even need to see The Hustler to get it, but like The Hustler just adds depth to it when you watch it. And speaking of obviously like the diversity of what he does, but also his longevity, because here's the thing, he isn't somebody like Clint Eastwood who's just pumping out like mediocre things just to pump out mediocre things. Dude made Silence in 2016 and made The Irishman, which I know there's a few people at SiftPop that aren't the hugest fan of The Irishman, but like,
Yeah.
it has its flaws. Like, dude, you could have just cast a younger person to play them when they're younger, or at least put a body double, man. That's
the
like
curb stomping scene is so rough.
So rough. But like, he's still making great things, and like, he makes concert films. The Last Waltz is one of the greatest concert films I've ever seen, and I love that so much. That George Harrison documentary that I talked about recently hit so deeply too, and I was not expecting that. It was 3.5 hours of like deep philosophical breakdown, because like, I called it an appendix to his faith-based trilogy, because George Harrison was so grounded in faith.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised Scorsese wanted to make that. I even really enjoyed that Fran Lebowitz documentary series on Netflix about New York that came out. I think that was 2 years ago at this point, or maybe a year ago. And like, he just does whatever, and he's still doing them. And I would be lying if I didn't say legitimately Killers of the Flower Moon might be my number one most anticipated film the rest of this year. Because like, Scorsese doing a Western. He's doing something new. Dude's like 80. Just like, and nothing's stopping him.
He's doing something new, but with isn't DiCaprio and De Niro both in it?
Yeah, and
so
Jesse
he's got
Plemons is going to be the lead this time around.
Yeah, he's going to be the lead.
Which I guess Jesse Plemons might be the next one to take that mantle, because I don't know, because like, Leo's just making movies like every 5 years at this point.
I know, it's crazy.
So he has other things to worry about.
When did De Niro start really aging out of Scorsese, though? Was it around Casino?
Casino was his last film
until
in 95, until The Irishman. And then DiCaprio started with Gangs of New York, and then basically was the lead in every single one of his movies except for Hugo, which also Hugo.
Yeah, like, there's another example.
Made a family movie. And like, oh my God, it's such a beautiful love letter to cinema, though. That movie makes me feel a lot of feelings.
That's the first movie they showed me in my intro to film course in college.
Interesting. My episode with Jake was just us gushing about it the whole entire time. Like, we're like, we kind of feel like we have to talk about, like, there were some flaws with this movie, right? But the thing is, it's like, it just has that feeling about it. But you know, Scorsese's not just doing it because he's doing it. He's doing it well, and he doesn't pull punches. He does what he wants, and you know, he's gonna get his $200 million budgets from somebody. Apple TV Plus now. So sorry, I was just gonna say, use all that cash that Apple just has lying around places.
Now that they're winning Best Picture and everything, you know, I'm sure
there you go. They're gunning for another one.
Yeah, double down.
But
that'd be interesting to see if at this point any one of these movies could be Scorsese's last. So is the Academy gonna try to honor him one more time? It's been since The Departed.
I guess it's like, if this is a great film, then it's going to be hard to compete when you just think about the talent involved in this movie. Like, it's definitely going to be a big one. But I guess, because obviously we talked about his diversity, his longevity. Anything else, Robert, that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, I have a couple more. I will add, just kind of bouncing off what we were just talking about, is to go off your point. The reason why he's doing all these different things and the music documentaries and concert films and all that kind of stuff is because he just has a deep love of cinema, you know, like, and this isn't necessarily what he does in his movies, but he preserves world cinema. He talks about cinema, you know, that's why it's the meme where like just his face next to the word cinema. Like he does preserves world cinema, old cinema, talks about what he thinks is great these days, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a great thing to see how much he actually cares about the craft. And like you were saying, just isn't in it for another paycheck, isn't in it because he wants to keep himself busy and this is the only thing he knows how to do. It's because he has a true love for the craft and he's gonna do it until he can't.
Yeah. Well, and you could tell that he is a real student of film too, because you watch films like Cape Fear and Shutter Island, it's Hitchcock through and through, especially Cape Fear, like through and through, that is a Hitchcock film. Yeah. I had a whole new appreciation for silence when I watched it, because when I saw, this was only the second time I've watched it, because I saw it in theaters and it was my #1 film of 2016.
Oh yeah.
And I was sitting there watching it again, and like the opening scene, I'm like, Kurosawa? And like that opening sequence with the narration, like the somber tone, the fog, I'm like, wait a minute. This feels right out of a Kurosawa film. And like, I didn't pick that up when I watched it in theaters in 2016, because I just hadn't seen that. I don't even know if I saw any Kurosawa films at that point. But like at this point, I watched like 10 or 12 of them. And I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And you can tell that he's doing this homage to, because this is a film about Scorsese's faith, but it's also a film about Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's a better way to have an homage than arguably the greatest Japanese filmmaker of all time in Akira Kurosawa. Right. And I think that's what is so great too, because, you know, people that get that recognition, like Tarantino, everybody's like, oh, you could see all the movies that he loves and stuff like that, because like Tarantino really wears it.
Yeah, I was gonna say
you could pick up on okay, I can see what kind of films he was watching that influenced this, and like he'll even explicitly say like this was an homage to this director. And but the thing is, it's like it's not so obnoxious in your face about it. Right. Which like I don't mind that when I watch Tarantino movies, because like it's like watching a Tarantino movie is a very specific experience.
Yeah.
Like I'm not watching it to be like this is not a refined drama. No, it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. This is exactly what you expect it to be.
Right.
But
when you watch Tarantino, you're not like oh no, this seems too referential or anything, because that's what you're getting into with Tarantino. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about both of these guys.
But any other main points that you wanted to make?
Two more. One will be very quick, and I'll save that one for last. This one is we've mentioned it in passing a number of times, but it's just his filmmaking style. Because even though you go from Silence to Goodfellas to Wolf of Wall Street to Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, there's still like little filmmaking things that stay consistent throughout all of his movies. Specifically, like I always think of just like the way he puts up just an image, like a still image on screen sometimes, almost like you're looking at a PowerPoint. It helps make his point. His like how he likes to I don't know how to describe it, but like I'm thinking of the scene where the guy gets hit over the head with the Jesus painting in The Departed. Yeah, just the way it's all edited. The Rolling Stones music is another hallmark of Scorsese. You know, he just has a very specific filmmaking style that, like you were saying, if you're paying attention, you could still tell that Goodfellas and Alice are the same director. Yeah. But at the same time, the stories are different enough to not seem redundant.
The two things that always stick out to me is those the long takes, the Coco Cabana and Goodfellas, like that tracking shot, and
absolutely iconic.
Like you have those in quite a few of his other films in different ways. Like you have it in Mean Street, following Harvey Keitel through like the strip club, and like the camera push, like that push up to like that push up to Harvey Keitel's face in Mean Street. Or they have such a great one in Last Temptation of Christ, when Jesus turns the water into wine, the guy looks back at him and it just is pushing the Willem Dafoe smirking face. I'm like, there you are, Marty. It's just like that shot and just like, like those are the things like especially when you watch all of them week to week to week to week for months, you start to like, oh, there it is. But they're so great, and you feel like you know Scorsese's voice, and it shines through in his films. And I think one thing that you alluded to with like the editing, one thing that I think is great is because Scorsese works with greatness. Thelma, the editing in his movies are amazing, and they're so consistent because it's been the same person for decades. And that's impressive. And like, he's had a couple, Ballhaus, Richardson, Prieto, his cinematographers over the years, because like Prieto took over with Wolf of Wall Street, did Silence, did The Irishman, is doing Killers of the Flower Moon. But I think it's Robert Richardson from like the early 90s through Hugo did all the cinematography, and you can feel it. They experiment, like, even if it's not an ode to a specific filmmaker, but like The Aviator, it was an ode to the different color gradients of filmmaking from that time. And that's why it looks so weird at times, but like it's done on purpose. And one person that I am really impressed by is Robbie Richardson, who is I think he would say he was the leader of the band. I watched a documentary about the band that he made. I'm like, this is a little biased, just a little bit. But like, he was from the band, and he worked with Scorsese ever since The Last Waltz, and he was the music supervisor on like, or executive music producer, whatever his title was as things went on. He's the one who would pick the music that would go along with things. I don't think he ever composed, but like, he was the one who would pick like the popular music, and you could feel that with him, Marty, with like Color of Money. There's Werewolves of London. It's in the way that you use it by Eric Clapton. Like, there's just, it's just this classic rock hit. Right. And it's so funny when I watched Shine a Light for the first time and I got to the end of the movie, I'm like, where was Gimme Shelter? Because they don't play it during that concert. And Mick Jagger specifically did not want to play it because he's like, this is going to be the first Scorsese movie without Gimme Shelter in it. Which, that was very interesting because the band let him really direct them. The Rolling Stones did it. They were just like, they were doing their thing. So, which I think was why Shine a Light's not as interesting of a movie. But I think, like, even with Shutter Island, because there's no original score in it, those are all hand-picked pieces of modern classic music that Robbie Richardson, oh, sorry, not Robbie Richardson, it's Robbie Robertson. That's why I kept getting mixed up. Robbie Robertson, corrected myself. There you go. Robbie Robertson handpicked all of those tracks for Shutter Island, and my God, some of them are haunting.
I didn't realize none of that was original. No. I knew there was the one track that's also an Arrival. I think it's called On the Nature of Daylight. It's like that violin track. It plays like in the scene where Leo's with his wife and it's going all, the camera's going all around. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, the music is always great. Everything about the way it's edited, the way it looks. He always just has something very specific, yet it always works for whatever the specific movie is. And just as you were talking, it just is amazing to me. We went from Hugo to Wolf of Wall Street to Silence. That's just insane. Like,
crazy.
He's just a great filmmaker.
Well, I think it says a lot when great filmmakers surround themselves with very specific talent that elevate their work. And like, I'm a huge Coen Brothers fan, if people couldn't figure it out why I started this whole entire thing with the Coen Brothers. But like, it's hard to watch Coens without Roger Deakins. But like, Bruno Dobinel is a fantastic cinematographer too. So, but like, with Deakins doing their cinematography for all those years, and Carter Burwell, like, it just doesn't sound right without a Carter Burwell score in a Coen Brothers movie, or Roderick James, who's fake because it's just the Coen Brothers doing the editing. So yeah, they have a pseudonym when they do the editing of their own movie.
I didn't even know that. That's a fun fun thing to know.
Because like Roderick Jaynes won an Oscar.
And it's actually them.
Yeah. So
what movie was that for then?
Oh, I'm gonna guess it was Fargo,
Okay.
but I don't like put that down as like
Right.
my 100% my answer. But like it's like they won, and I think they won editing for No Country too.
That would
So like, yeah, because like it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
If you want to listen to an hour and a half, almost 2-hour episode about it, that's how long my episode was with my friends Matt and Alex. We recorded that one in person. But you said you had one other one.
Oh yeah. I saw a tweet. It turns out it was 3 years ago now, from Chris Evangelista, back when the first Scorsese versus Marvel thing was all starting. And this tweet has stuck with me. I'll read the first half because he compares Scorsese to Marvel. I'm not here to bash on Marvel, but this is the 4 things that he lists about what's great about Scorsese. 1, he makes masterpieces. 2, he loves pasta. 3, he calls movies pictures. And 4, he's tiny and adorable. So those are my concluding thoughts on what makes Scorsese great.
The tiny and adorable things, just like the cherry on top.
Yeah.
Because so like when you see him in like his movies and something, like so tiny.
Yeah, especially now that he's like old and like fragile looking.
Little grandpa.
Because he used to have like the slick black hair and the beard and all that.
Beard.
Yeah. But now he's yeah.
The only point that I feel like I was going to make that we didn't cover already, and I alluded to this already, is just how he challenges people. Like, don't go into his films expecting this to just be like an easy thing to process. Like, there's very few filmmakers that make such despicable protagonists, but make such great films that challenge the audience to really process these characters. And with things like Last Temptation of Christ is like, it's so interesting because it really depends on how you feel and what you believe in. But like, I watched that film and I'm like, how's this controversial? But like, I also don't have that strong connection to like, Jesus wasn't a man. And it's just like, but it's so much more interesting this way.
Oh,
like,
I completely agree with you.
And it's just like, but that's the thing. It's such a compelling film and it's such a personal thing, a personal film for him. And it is challenging. And that's what I love about them, is because like I could write 4 or 5 pages easy on any of these films just because it's like so much that I want to say about it.
Oh yeah.
And like, not every film I could sit there and like gonna continue. And like, for the record, I'm a huge Marvel fan and we'll watch anything, but I don't know how many of them I could sit there and literally write pages upon pages about.
Yeah.
Maybe like a handful, but like basically it's anything Scorsese. I could sit there. Like, I think one of my longest articles was about The Last Waltz because I just love music so much. And that really spoke to me on a deep level. And like, if you're a huge music fan and you haven't seen The Last Waltz, like that's a must watch because it is a time capsule of a whole entire generation, actually probably 2 generations of music, all rolled into one concert. And it's so fascinating. And it's such a great, like it's shot so well too. But obviously we had a lot of evidence why Scorsese is one of the all-time greats. This was probably an easy
one. Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of reasons. But Robert, what is your favorite Martin Scorsese film?
My number one Scorsese? That would be Silence.
I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah. I honestly, it might have been one of the first Scorsese movies I saw. I saw it in theaters, like literally on the last day that it was in theaters because I was in college at the time and I came home and I wanted to see it with my dad. And we were like, oh, let's go Friday. Check the show times. It's not showing on Friday. Today's Thursday. We need to go tonight. And it's kind of rocked me ever since. I'm not going to get super deep into it, but I alluded to, I was raised adjacent to that faith, inside the faith. And yeah, it gave me a whole lot to think about. I don't think you ever feel, personally, I don't feel it's nearly 3 hours. I never feel the runtime.
No.
It is very difficult to watch. It's not one that like, I'm in the mood for a fun movie, let's throw on silence. But like, if I'm in the mood to think, I'll either just think about it or I'll turn it on. I've seen it a few times at this point. Everyone is doing great work, from the actors to like the filmmakers behind the scenes. Yeah, there's just so much to love about Silence, as we've hit on throughout the episode.
It's one of those kinds of things where something's so great about that it just makes me sad. Is Liam Neeson. It's just like, come on, man. We know how good of an actor you are. Why do you keep making these movies?
Yeah.
And the thing is, I make this joke so much, but I think he's contractually obligated to be in Scorsese movies for less than 15 minutes. It's like, I don't think he can spend more than 15 minutes on screen in a Scorsese movie. But like that whole entire scene when he shows up and interacts with Andrew Garfield is just some next level stuff. The Inquisitor, the Interpreter, there's some amazing performances from obviously like the big name Hollywood actors, but like those Japanese actors are incredible.
The guy who plays Kikichiro is great.
Yeah. Oh my God. Such a frustrating character because I know people. I know a lot of Catholics like that.
Oh, no.
Well,
forgive me again, please.
That's not what forgiveness is supposed to be about. This isn't like a get out of jail free card. I could live my life however I want and just be like, forgive me. Oh my God. That movie, like, because I grew up with my grandparents and I'm confirmed Roman Catholic. My Catholic name is Jane Charles Francis Canto because I took St. Francis. And it's just like, I could talk a lot about organized religion specifically.
Oh, me too.
And Silence is so impressive because it's such a meaningful commentary on faith, but also a very biting commentary on missionary work and like organized religion specifically. Because it's so interesting because it seems like it's that story, but when it really comes down to it, it's really about a story of one man's commitment to his faith in all kinds of face of adversity.
Yep.
And I remember how that last shot of the movie hit me the first time in the theater. I'm like, damn. I'm just like, what? And you don't expect that kind of thing from like a movie like Silence, but like that's such a thematically rich film. Yeah. And now for something completely different. So my number one, and like I might have to contemplate this, but this has been my number one going into watching all of Scorsese's films, was Taxi Driver. And there's something deeply disturbing about that movie. And the fact that Scorsese made it that way and it works and penetrates you so deeply. And the fact that he was able to make Travis Bickle work as like a protagonist, because like this is a problematic, uncomfortable person to be riding along and being in his head. It's such an uncomfortable experience in Scorsese, because like you could tell that was like his coming out party. Because like Mean Streets was really close. But then Taxi Driver in 75 was just like, this is a whole new ballgame of filmmaking. And De Niro, that performance is haunting and uncomfortable. There's certain things in the movie that it's just plain uncomfortable. And like, I can't watch, it's hard to watch some of the scenes in it. Like, especially that one scene with Harvey Keitel and Jodie Foster. I'm just like, I don't know if I could sit and watch this. It's so uncomfortable. But like Jodie Foster's such an amazing actress too. And she's like 13.
She's super young.
Yeah, and like even like Albert Brooks and like his small like comic relief role in the movie, and it's such perfectly intricately made descent into darkness, and it's such a 70s movie.
Oh, 100%.
It's like French Connection, Apocalypse Now. You're going like Popeye Doyle's running into the darkness at the end of the movie. They rode right up to Kurtz into the darkness, and like that's exactly what we get into. And the score, that like it's so iconic at that point, like all that like jazz, and the ending is so interesting to think about, because I remember watching that in cinema class in high school and being told like, is that really happening? And I'm like, is it? I don't know. And like thinking about it that way, but like for the longest time it's like, and generally it's like I don't find myself being like, I'm a pretty positive person, so like it's kind of weird that like this has always been my number one Scorsese movie, because like I even was like, I didn't like Goodfellas as much because like, I hated Henry Hill so much. Hate Henry Hill so much. Which is interesting because I always like Casino more, which is really what most people wouldn't consider if you looked at the two of them. But like Taxi Driver, since I've seen it, I've seen that movie like 9 times probably at this point. And that's a hard watch. And that's just, even like Scorsese in it, that scene where he's talking about like wanting to like murder his wife and stuff like that, it's just like, I don't know if I ever want to go to New York. Maybe that's why I was so hesitant about going to New York my whole life until after college. Taxi Driver ruined it. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not going to this place.
Yeah, Taxi Driver is great. I've only seen it the one time, but the one thing that always sticks with me is the De Niro performance. Of course, the scene that everyone always references, the iconic scene, the "You talking to me" scene. You know,
talking to me?
You talking? You know, he's, like you said, he's a revelation in that movie. And was it like a coming out party for both of them at that point? Because
like that's the thing, because like I think Mean Streets put them both on the cusp.
Right. De Niro, he's great.
De Niro won the Oscar for Godfather Part 2.
Oh, that's right.
But this was his first big leading performance, and he killed it. And then obviously he won his Oscar for Raging Bull how many years later. And like De Niro's shown actually some surprising range in Scorsese movies. So like Rupert Pupkin is such a weird performance.
I love that performance so much.
Just like, you know, Jerry and I know each other. We're good friends. I'm here for a meeting with Jerry. Oh, I'm just going to take a seat here. I'll be perfectly fine. I won't bother you. I'm just like, who is this guy? and it's so odd. And it's just like, this is Robert De Niro. This is like, it's such a weird thing. And, you know, I don't know if De Niro's done better than Scorsese movies. And obviously he had The Godfather Part 2 also, but like definitely not now. Like if it wasn't for The Irishman and maybe David O. Russell, basically De Niro would just be doing
and Stardust.
Grandpa. Oh my god,
he's so good.
Well, because if you think about it, when was Stardust? 2000.
I think 2007.
Oh my god, that's 15 years old.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
He wasn't looking like super old yet, like he does now. Yeah.
Now, like when they brought him out at the Oscars, the three of them for The Godfather, Pacino looks awful, like really bad. And then Francis Ford Coppola just looks like a really old Italian man. De Niro looks like a distinguished Italian grandpa. I'm just like, there you go. But I think I appreciate you coming on. I think this is a really interesting conversation. Obviously, it's like there's so much to say about Scorsese, and we could have just been like, "Duh, he is."
Yeah.
Show.
Here's our
That's why
15-second show.
But obviously, that would be very interesting. That video would be 10 seconds.
Mhm.
But Robert, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your thoughts, and as always, it's great conversation. And what did I have you down for Spielberg?
Tintin. So I like to choose the not obvious ones.
Nobody picked Raiders until like last. I'm like, nobody picked any Indiana Jones because like Adam was like, what's left? I'm like, all of Indiana Jones. Like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, yeah, nobody picked Indiana Jones until he picked Raiders, and my friend Alex picked Temple of Doom. I think somebody got Last Crusade. My favorite. Oh, I could gush about that. Harrison Ford and Sean Connery together.
Yeah.
Endlessly. But I guess, Robert, if you'd like to wrap up and shamelessly plug one last time and then say goodbye to all these lovely people.
Yeah, again, I'll just say head over to Twitter _Rob's thoughts. And
it's not just movies. Baseball season starting.
Baseball, yes.
Baseball start. Well, they delayed the Yankees Red Sox, I think, to Friday, right?
2 days from now, yeah. It was supposed to be tomorrow.
Yeah, that was supposed to be the first game.
Yep.
I get to watch the Diamondbacks get railed by San Diego tomorrow, so that's going to be fun.
Wonderful.
Actually, if that doesn't come on until 9:40, I'm definitely not watching the game. That's a tricky thing about being an East Coast person liking a West Coast team. I'm like, I'm 30. I'm not staying up and watching that until like however the hell. I only stay up late because I get caught up editing. That's by accident. So, but Robert, thank you again for coming on. And thank all of you for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.